Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Heroes of the Land. Today, I sit down with farmer A.Y. Katsof. He lives in Eish Kodesh in the Shomron. He has a fascinating story. It was just a couple of years ago that he rescued a few Ethiopian Jews through Kenya, South Sudan, and really a crazy journey. He got arrested a couple of times. At one point, he was facing 40 years in prison. Really a fascinating story. He's really incredibly brave person. He just went out, heard there were people in need, and he went out for a couple of year journey all over Africa and Israel, back and forth and back and forth. Really, really unbelievable stuff. So here it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Karanashvius. We will hear more about them later in the episode. But now let's get to it. I'm Yisrael Yitkowski. You are listening to Foundations Podcast. I heard you have this incredible story about rescuing some Jewish girls from Ethiopia, so I would want to just jump right into it.
Let's just say that there were two. We found out that there were two girls, two sisters, Ethiopian Jewish sisters, that they were sold to South Sudan for cows, and when they were about 12 years old. And the story really touched my heart. I thought about my two oldest daughters, and I thought if, God forbid, something would happen to them and there would be nobody that could help them. You know how I could only hope and pray that somebody would go out there and help them. And I kind of made a decision. At the time I was in Ethiopia when I heard the story, and their mother told it to me, and she broke down crying while she was saying it. And it's not like she was looking to tell me. It was, I kind of bumped into her and I had to get the story out of her. She didn't even want to talk about it. And when she started talking about it, she kind of broke down crying.
How long since the mother saw the daughters?
About 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. What happened was, if we go through the whole story from the beginning, so the mother, who was a Jewish Ethiopian girl, grew up in a Jewish Ethiopian village, northern Ethiopia, near Gondar. She was born in the 70s, and sometime in the 80s, she was about maybe a 14-year-old girl, and she was on the way to Israel with her whole family, Operation Moses. And her family, walked from northern Gondar, northern Ethiopia, through Sudan. And then at the time, Operation Moses, what happened was they waited in Sudan, in Gadaref and Rakuba and other villages there. The Red Cross built these camps for the Ethiopian refugees that were fleeing the war that was going on at the time. And the Mossad agents came and they found them and they brought them to Port Sudan, where they built a diving center. And on the day they would dive, and at night they would smuggle out the Ethiopian Jews through the Red Sea. They had a ship that was in international waters, and they brought them to Sharm el-Sheikh, which at the time was still Israel. And then from Sharm el-Sheikh they flew them to Israel. So her family made it to Israel, and she was working there. And it's not clear exactly what happened, but basically, it's not exactly clear, but at the end of the day, she was in prison for killing someone.
Wow. This is still in Sudan?
In Sudan, in Gadaref, and she was on death row.
Wow, so she didn't even make it. Her family made it to Israel,
They were supposed to kill her there. And what happened was the head of the prison basically paid money to the family and bought her out. Now, her brother came back looking for her as a Mossad agent, and he showed up at the prison, and her name wasn't even on the paper. She never showed up to the prison. And usually when something like that happens, that means that they died in prison. Mostly a 14-year-old Ethiopian girl shows up in a Sudanese prison. They usually don't come out alive. And what happened was, the reason why her name wasn't on is she gave a different name. She didn't want to have any connection. She wanted them to know that she's Jewish. So instead of the name Tuavit, she gave the name Tuwiye. Tuwiye is an Arab name. And in Sudan, they're Arabs. It's divided. North Sudan is Arab, South Sudan is tribal. Um, and she left the prison, and the head of the prison married her, and she had her first child, and they named her in the Dinka language, because her husband's from the Dinka tribe, Piat, or in Arabic Taibe, or in Hebrew Tova, because like she's alive and she's out of the prison. And then the second daughter was Aduk, or Susie, and they had other children. And if we fast forward, basically when these two girls were 12 years old, they were sold to South Sudan. The oldest girl, Piat, she was married off, sold to a man named Khamis, and they had their first child. And they named her Ayen. Ayen is actually the first cow that was paid for his wife, and you named the daughter after that cow because like you missed the cow, like that.
How long ago was this? What year did this take place?
This happened about I would say 15 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy that these things like still happen, and it's
Yeah,
like
that's tradition. That's the tradition in South Sudan. It's what people do. You pay a wife with cows. That's a tradition there till today. And let's just say Fia was not she wasn't treated too well. Um, she was beaten, which is also the tradition there. And she took her baby Ayed and she ran away to her mother. And this is a couple days of traveling, about a week of traveling. It's from Rumbek all the way to Gadaref. And the husband basically went after her, and with the police took her out because the wife's not allowed to run away, and brings her back to the village. And ever since, about 10 years, they disconnected to the mother. They don't really speak to the mother. There's a point where the mother doesn't even know if she's alive. The second sister is a similar story. And the mother's telling me this, and I said I'll do whatever I can to try to find them. Did I really believe I would find them? Middle of, South Sudan, a rugged place, no electricity, no water. A very slight chance, but I said I'll do whatever, I can. We did a lot of work. I actually bought the brother who's in Ethiopia a smartphone, so he can start trying on Facebook, look for them. They're not on Facebook, but they don't have smartphones. One of them doesn't have a phone at all. The other, later on, we found out she had a phone, but he finds her through different friends that he went to school with. And they told her, yeah, she's in Juba. She's working in Juba. She has 3 children. She's not living with her husband. And I call her, and I start talking to her in Arabic. She only speaks Arabic.
Oh, you speak Arabic as well?
I speak Arabic. And I start talking to her. We start trying to think of ways how to help her, how to get her out. That was the first time she found out she was Jewish. And she told me later on that she learned always about the stories about the Jews leaving Egypt. And for her, just finding out that she's Jewish, she felt like an uplifting, like a connection to God. And then she felt like the Jews in Egypt when they dreamt about leaving. But then she's like, yeah, but that's them. For me, I'll never leave. I don't really have a chance. There's no way it's ever going to happen to me. And it was just like in a dream. And basically, I'm not going to go into all the details, but we tried different ways. And at the end, I flew down to Uganda. And I met somebody that helps children go from South Sudan to Uganda for school. Because in South Sudan, the school situation is much harder. There's a lot of kids that are not in school. And through that organization, we were supposed to bring them out to the schools there. And it was a long time, and we were waiting at the border of South Sudan and Uganda. It was the end of 2018. December 2018, and it was already like past midnight, and it was very hot, humid, middle of the night. You could barely breathe. And we're at the bus stop where they're supposed to cross, and they're not crossing. Like the buses come, but no, like different people come out, not them. And we lost connection already for over 12 hours. We don't even know where they are. We're thinking the worst. Maybe were followed by their family. Maybe they were arrested. Remember, they don't even have papers, so maybe our guy wasn't able to get them across. South Sudan, there's a lot of civil wars. You can't even drive from Juba to the border without like patrols. Maybe they were kidnapped in the middle. Maybe they were, who knows what. There's the tribal wars. The Dinka fight this tribe or that
Like
tribe.
anything could have happened, and that.
Yeah, and we're at this bus stop, so I start walking around, and it's pitch black. There's no lights, and there's hundreds of people just sleeping on the floor, waiting for like the morning bus. And I'm thinking maybe they came earlier and they fell and went to sleep. And I'm like looking through families, stepping through them. You know, stepped on somebody by mistake, and I'm trying to like on my phone flashlight trying to figure it out. And people start getting upset at me. Who's this guy walking around? And I'm the only white person there, and it's scary. Some people start screaming at me, and then the guard comes with with his gun. What are you doing here? I had my guy, and my guy's explaining to him in the local Ugandan language. And then we see a bus, and we see the two girls come off the bus. And I remember we run to them from excitement. And their back was facing to us. And I touched one of them on the shoulder from behind. And she turns around, and she starts screaming. She's never seen a white person before.
Wow, that's crazy.
And in their tradition, they learned that white people are cannibals. They eat people. And she was scared. And she had to calm her down, And I'm like, no, I'm Harun, the one talking to you on the phone. And then and we were like, wait, where are the kids?
These are just the two daughters of the mother that you met earlier.
Exactly.
The grandchildren weren't there.
Yeah, we didn't understand why. We said, are they on the bus still? Should we go get them? And they didn't want to tell us, but basically they tried to take the kids, and the family suspected that they would want to take their kids. In the West, the default is children are with the mother. In places like that, it's not. The default is the kids are with uncles, grandparents, something like that, not with the mother necessarily. And we understood that they left without their kids. They said at least they'll save their lives. And I remember we took them back to the hotel, and they didn't speak the language, only Arabic and Dinka. And we tried, different ways to try to get the kids. One way is we called up like the uncles, and they said, no problem, you want the kids, take them. Come, give us $50 per kid, and they're yours. And we had a guy that we sent, he brought the money, and the guy took the money and said, okay, now $100. We understood that they were playing games with us. And the other kids, the father, so we talked to the father, said, listen, they could get free school and free education, medical, everything, because these kids weren't even in school. The medical situation was not good. They're living in a mud hut. And he said, that's great, but I just have to go take advice from the local witch. That's what they do there, where they go to like the local witch. And they go to the local witch, and the witch says that your wife's family is trying to steal the kids, don't send them. So we didn't send the kids. We waited about a week, and then we said, you know what, we'll take them at least to Ethiopia, where their mom still was, the grandmother, and we'll work on the kids. And we took them through Uganda, crossed through Kenya, South Ethiopia, all the way up through Addis Ababa into Gondar. It's about 8 days of traveling on buses.
This is just you and the kids?
The two girls. Yeah, each place there's a different story, crossing the borders. Every time there's something. I remember one border, the hardest border, was from Kenya to Ethiopia. So you find a guy that was willing to take them around with a motorcycle. And he says, I want 2,500 for each girl. And that's a lot of money, 2,500. I'm thinking about them like it's their lives, like we just have to, once they're in Ethiopia, their mom is there, they'll get there. It's final border. So I'm thinking, you know what, okay, what can I do? And they're like, wait, 2,500 what? Like, Kenya shillings. I did fast calculation, and it's like a couple dollars. I was like, listen, it's a lot of money. I don't know.
Like if it was $2,500,
If he knew how much I was willing to pay.
yeah.
And we finally got to their mother now to see the sight of their mom reuniting with her daughters after about 10 years. It's unbelievable.
It's probably worth it just for that moment.
It's unbelievable. She reunited daughter with her mom. You know, anybody who has children can imagine not seeing their children for so long, not knowing if they're alive, not knowing if they're okay. And I remember coming back to Israel, and I met with the head of Binyamin. He was the one who was, like helping with the bureaucracy in Israel to get them permits to come to Israel because they're right of return. As Jews, they have the right of return. And he wants to do like a l'chaim. He's like, no l'chaim. I'm like, well, look, I showed him the video of the how they reunited. He's like, the kids are still there. We don't leave anyone behind. He's like, yeah, but it's a first step. The kids, it's a little more complicated. It'll take longer. It's also legally, it's more complicated. He said, we don't leave anyone behind. Until we finish the job, we're not stopping. So we're trying. And then basically a guy called the father, and he was told him these words. He answered this time because for a long time he wasn't answering. Finally answered. He said, why let your children die in South Sudan when they could live in Uganda or somewhere else with school and health and everything? And the father was in shock. And he said, how do you know my daughter died? And what happened is the oldest daughter, Piat, had 3 children. Ayen, she had a boy, and she had a baby who then was 5 years old. And that morning she wasn't feeling well and she died, probably malaria. She walked outside, it was hot, she kind of fainted, they put her in her bed and she never woke up.
What, the 5-year-old?
5. So first of all, we had to call the mom and tell her. We had to break her the news that she's never going to see her daughter again, which is the worst news you could ever tell anyone. But that kind of made a switch to the father. And then the father agreed, you know what, I'll send my children. And even that, it wasn't so simple. He said, we sent him money, and then he disappeared. And we sent him money again, and then we said, okay, no more money, we'll just give him the bus ticket. We're not going to send him money for a bus, we're going to give him the actual ticket. And then he said, oh, I can't leave because I owe somebody money. I punched somebody in the face and broke their teeth, and if I don't give them $250, so they can't leave. And $250 in South Sudan is a lot of money. Just so you should understand, like he was making then about $17 a month.
Wow.
As a government worker. And everybody told me, don't give him the money.
Like
he's just
2 years worth of a payment.
Yeah. They said, don't give him the money. He's just trying to rob you. And I remember it was Friday night. It's Friday night, and my phone rings. And I'm Shomer Shabbat, but I look at it, it's my guy from Uganda. It's Pikuach Nefesh. And it was the middle of Kiddush. So I go in the back room. And I said, what's the story? And he's like, I have indication that they're going to leave. I think they're going to leave tonight. The father with the kids.
To come meet you, to come bring the
to
kids
Uganda.
to you.
Yeah. So Shabbos morning, it's very weird. I get in my car and I drive to the airport. It's very weird to be in the airport on Shabbos. But it's Pikuach Nefesh. 2 Jewish kids. In the end of the world. And I flew. I tried as much as I can, the least like Chil Shabbos, whatever I could do b'shinu, I did b'shinu. And I flew to landed in Entebbe. And just as a Jew landing in Entebbe, you remember the whole Entebbe rescue
story, yeah.
and everything. And you see that big letters, Entebbe International Airport. We waited, and again he didn't come. And then we waited another day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And I started checking flights to go back. I'm like, yeah, it was a waste of time. Chil Shabbos didn't work out. What could I do? And when I was like checking flights to get back, again, there was an indication that he's finally leaving again. He kept on playing games. So then he finally came. And we took the kids. And then the idea again was to bring them through Kenya, Ethiopia to their mom, and then hopefully by then we'll get the right permits to bring them to Israel.
To bring
right of return.
the whole family, the
Yeah.
kids and the mothers to Israel.
Yeah, and we brought them to Kenya, Ethiopia, and then halfway through Ethiopia, we went through a bunch of checkpoints, and then one of the boys wasn't feeling well. The boy, there was a girl and a boy, and his eyes like had like white coming out of it, and he's very skinny. And we stopped at a medical clinic, and the nurse is like, "Listen, I don't know if he's gonna make it. Give him to the hospital." And then I had somebody that said, "Listen, you could take a little plane, a small charter, like a 4-seater, and we'll take you to Ethiopia." So I was like, instead of traveling for another couple days, whatever, that's another 5 days, I could take an hour flight. No brainer. So I went to a small airport, and that was a mistake. Give you a tip: if you ever need to smuggle kids, stick to land transportation. Stay away from airports.
They thought you're kidnapping these kids.
Yeah, there's a lot of, sadly, there's a lot of child trafficking for all different reasons. A lot in Kenya, a lot all over. And they're trying to crack down on it, these countries, for a lot of reasons. One of them is there's different UN committees and money that they could get to if they prove that they're cracking down on child trafficking. The truth is in a lot of these places you see it. You actually see it. It's not like you think they're trying to crack down on the cases that are right in front of your faces. Like you go to the markets there and you see really sad stuff. But they decided, and then once they caught me and they talked to the head person in the immigrations in the country. So that was it. They locked me up with the kids. And before they took my phone, I texted basically every connection that I had. Try something. My Israel connection, my official Israel connection from the agency, wrote me an official message saying that we have nothing to do with you. And that what you did could be considered international child trafficking, and we can't help you. So until then, you have Israel on your back, so you feel all of a sudden that happens, boom, you're alone. Just like that. That's when all of a sudden you're like, oh my, this is real.
Just sitting there this is 3-4 years ago. You're just sitting there in the jail for child trafficking. I could just imagine what a punishment they could give to someone they catch.
Yeah, they told me. They said it's 20 years minimum for child trafficking, and I have 2 kids, so it's 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
So how did you end up getting out?
So one of my connections, a guy named David Avery, he does a lot of Israel Africa advocacy, and he was in touch with the pastor there, Pastor Dennis, who's also a politician. And he comes, and all of a sudden I hear him speaking outside. I didn't even know who he was, and he's speaking Swahili. And then they open the door, and I see him, and he's standing there with this traditional robe type thing, but with a big Kenya pin. And he's speaking, and he's like, yes, him. And I was like, I don't know, okay, what's this guy? And basically he says that how he knows me, and he's my friend, and we work together, and we help kids, Okay, this is weird. And he took me out. He signed 1 million Kenya shillings bail, that if I disappear, he'll have to pay the money. And of course, my passports I had to leave, and his ID had to give in. And I had to show up every day to immigrations. Every day, show up till they figure out what to do. And he didn't leave me. He was with me the whole time. A couple of weeks.
And you were going in every day?
Every day. Almost every day we showed up. Not Sunday, Saturday, they're closed. And there's an investigator. You sit there for hours in the hallway. And they investigate, In the meantime, I went to the Israeli embassy. Before I went to the Israeli embassy, I did a fixer-upper with the kids. Now, it's interesting because I got them dinner. And they're like, why are you getting me food? We ate already breakfast. You're used to eating once a day.
It's crazy.
And in breakfast, the girl sees this orange. And she's like, Bodukal, which means orange in Arabic. And her eyes lit up like it's an ice cream sundae. And I asked her, have you ever seen one? And she's like, Akid, of course. I'm like, have you ever tasted it? And she's like, la, I've never tasted. I'm like, you want it? She's like, move me like I could. And I was like, sure. And she didn't know what to do with it. She just took the thing and like looked at it. And I had to show her how to peel it and like eat. She, I divided it up and she took one thing. She took a little nibble and she put it down. She was like, it was too
Didn't like
weird for
it?
her. It was weird. It was just different. It was weird. And then at dinner, I made her use a fork. The first time using a fork. I was like so excited. They're like playing with it. They're used to eating with their hands. And we went to the Israeli embassy. I was sure, like the movies, you show up. I imagined the helicopter come down, the ladder, climb up,
With the kids, go straight to
Yeah,
Israel,
right
pick
to
up the parents
Israel.
on the way, and
Exactly.
no,
First of all,
real life is not like the movies, I guess.
First of all, they didn't even let me in at the beginning because I didn't have IDs. I had no
Oh,
ID.
it's still by the government.
Yeah. Now, the way it works is that there's a local Kenya guard, and then only if you pass through him, then you get to the Israeli guard. And I tried to convince him, just call the Israeli guard, call the guy. And he's like, no, you don't have papers. There's no way. This is Israeli embassy. Israeli embassy is very strict. I'm like, listen, just call. And I see the camera, and I'm like going like this to the camera. I'm like, oh, man, It's boiling hot in the sun. The sun is beating on you. The humid is unbelievable. You're just all sweat. And there's mosquitoes in the air. And there's like trucks driving by with the smoke. And you just like can't even think anymore. And you didn't bring water. You didn't think you'd be standing out there for so long. You start dehydrating.
The kid was feeling better at this
No, he
point,
was
or he was
sick.
still
He was
sick?
sick. The kids are complaining. I got him eye drops for his eye, so his eyes were a little bit better, but he's still very weak. The kids are complaining. They're like, let's get at it. What are we doing here? I'm like babysitting. The boy's 8 years old. The girl's 10. And finally, all of a sudden I see an Israeli guard. And I'm like calling him in Hebrew. He's like standing on the top with an M16, like protect. And I'm like, my bro. And finally some Israeli guard comes up and he's like, Masipu. And I start telling him in Hebrew. And he's like, what? He starts asking me different questions in Hebrew. And then he tells the guy, okay, he's okay. Come with me. I go with him. I go into the little office. And it's kind of like, remember in Israel, used to be like the intercoms, these like old off-white phones in the entrance to the building. You pick up, you press the button. That's what they have to speak to the consul.
Mm.
So there's like the deputy consul there. And she's standing behind bulletproof glass. At least there's air conditioning in the room. And I'm talking and she's like pointing to the wall and I see this phone, I pick it up and you have to press the button and talk. And I tried to, and I remember explaining to her the story and she's sitting there, this is Israeli. First of all, it's nice to like speak Hebrew, after so long being stuck there, into Israeli. And she just sits there with her mouth open, looks at me, looks at the kids, like trying to understand, is this real? Is this fake? Is this really happening? And I was like, my connection in Israel told me that he'd let you guys know I'm coming. He didn't let you know. And she's like, nobody spoke to me. And she's like, wait here. She goes somewhere. She comes back and she said the same words of the message that I got. I'm sorry, I can't help you. This could be international kidnapping and you have to leave. Then the security guard opens the door and asks me to leave. I said, listen, you got some AC here. It works.
Couple more minutes, please.
Exactly what I said. Just let me a couple minutes just to think what my next step are. And he's like, this isn't a waiting room. Leave. And I was kicked out of the Israeli embassy. Back into the street. Pastor Dennis came, picked us up, and he's like, I have an idea. I have a guy. And he takes us to the South Sudanese embassy in Kenya. Now, the South Sudanese embassy is like the biggest embassy of South Sudan. South Sudan country, it's a new country. It started in Kenya. And we go in there, we meet his guy, and right away he's like, no, this is way above my pay grade. And then we go to the deputy ambassador, and then he takes us into the ambassador's room. And then we're sitting there, kind of like, there's this couch, I'm sitting over here, across from me is the ambassador, then over here are the two kids, Pastor Dennis over here, and then the whole room is full of every, basically embassy worker that came to watch the show, what's going on, who is with our kids. And the ambassador starts speaking to the kids in Dinka. Now Dinka, only the Dinka tribe speaks Dinka. And it happens to be that the ambassador is Dinka, and the kids are
from the same tribe where the kids came from.
And he's speaking to them in Dinka. And right away, he's basically looks at me, he's like, you stole my kids.
What did the kids
These are
tell
my
them?
responsibility. It was Dinka. I don't speak a word of Dinka. And I tried to explain to him, no, I'm taking every word I would say, he cut me off. And he's really angry. And he basically looks at me and he's like, you are arrested in the name of South Sudan. Because by international law, an embassy is like the country. And you will not leave here, and the kids will not leave here. So I remember thinking to myself, like, the rock bottom.
Was arrested once, finally managed to get out, even though the Israelis didn't help. Went to the Israeli embassy, again, no help. Hopefully South Sudanese embassy will help you, and now they arrest you again. Like, it's crazy.
And I'm arrested, like, and now on the way to the embassy, I get a phone call from work. It's a guy, his name is Roy, and he's like, hey, what's your name? What's her name? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, come on, man. Nobody goes so long. There must be a girl involved. What's her name? It's like, dude, this is a real story. I'm with the kids. Like, you want me to show you pictures of the kids? Like, this is real. He's like, listen, you don't have to tell me any luck. I'll just tell you what. If you don't get back soon, I'm telling you, you're not going to have a job. Not just not have a job, you're not going to have a wife and kids either. And I know from the inside. So basically, I feel like everything's falling apart. Israeli embassy kicks me out. My job basically lets me know I'm fired. My wife, he just hasn't been answering me for a while. And now this guy tells me,
you're arrested again.
Yeah. And I remember I basically went black. And it wasn't just because the guy in front of me was very black, but I remember being so angry. I was angry at God and angry at myself. I was angry at myself for being so stupid and childish to even dare to dream that I would do something so crazy. And then I was angry at God. I was like, God, these are not my kids. These are your kids. They're your Jewish kids. I have 6 kids of my own, 6 biological kids of my own. And then I said, you're the one who promised in Yeshayahu, אמור לצפון תני ולתימן אל תכלי, אביא בנייך מרחוק ובנתייך מקצה הארץ. I will tell to the north, give them back, and to the south, do not hold them back, for I will bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Talking about kibbutz galiot, the 10 tribes coming back. And I said, these are banatayich nekev. These are your boys and your sons and daughters from the ends of the earth right now, from the south. Here they are. And if you don't want them, that's not my problem. I did my side. I remember being angry at God.
It's been quite a journey over the past few months at Keren Hashviz. With Shmita on the horizon, we span the land of Israel, reaching out to hundreds of farmers, urging them to commit themselves to leave their fields. With the promise of support, thousands of farmers pledged to lay down their tools and submit themselves to a higher calling. At the same time, fundraising efforts were launched across the globe for a call to partner with the heroic farmers. Klal Yisrael answered the call and came through like never before. And then, in the twilight hours of the new year, farmers on 363 settlements walked away from their fields. They did the impossible. They abandoned their land and gave up their livelihood. We reached a historic milestone. For the first time in almost 2,000 years, 51% of privately owned Jewish agricultural land is lying fallow. The achievement is unprecedented, but we're far from done. We raised enough for the farmers to commit, but it's not enough to get them through the full year. If we don't continually support the farmers, some may buckle under the burden. The sacrifice may become too large, too heavy, and they may not be able to pull through. The farmers still need our support. We gave them our word. We won't let them down.
And I remember while I was feeling that anger and kind of basically gave up to, imagine the lawyers and trying to get me out of prison and whatever. All of a sudden, Pastor Dennis starts talking. And he was quiet this whole time. And he says very politely in a political way to the ambassador. He says, Your Excellency. Now, in Israel, we talk to ambassadors, it's like, Achi, And he's like, Your Excellency, the reason why these children are able to go to Israel. Now, until now, I didn't mention the word Israel. I didn't mention the word Jew. Growing up Jewish, you have to be careful, what you say and who likes you and who doesn't like you. For him,
especially in these countries, you're full on anti-Semite, completely done.
Exactly. So you don't even mention it. Now, Pastor Dennis is an evangelical Christian. And when I asked him, when he took me out, I said, why are you helping me? You don't know me? He says, you are a Jew going to Judea. And God promised anyone who helps the Jew go to Judea will be blessed. That was it. That was the reason why. Enough. And that's why he stayed with me the whole time. And here he tells the ambassador, he says the reason why they're able to go to Israel. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you mentioning Israel? We're not in enough trouble, man. And then he says even the worst, even makes it worse. Because they are from Jewish roots. Also Israel, also Jewish. Come on, man. All of a sudden the ambassador almost turns red. And he's like, why are you telling this to me? And I was like, there he goes. He's like, you think I don't know? This is history. You cannot make this up. We know about the Habasha Jews, which is the Ethiopian Jews, that came through our land to go to Israel. The question is, why just these children and not all of the other children? And I was like, well, let's start with these two and then we'll work with the other ones. And he's like, this is written in the Bible about the 10 tribes returning to the land. And he points to his desk, the Bible that's on his desk. You cannot make this up. And then he brings me to the shelf and he shows me the book of Shimon Peres. Not too small for a big dream, something like that. And he's like, what is your trick? What is your secret? And he starts telling me about how South Sudan is similar to Israel. And he's really from the 10 tribes. And how could it be that Israel is also a young country and succeeded, and South Sudan is also a young country with the same Arab enemy, that's the way he called it, but he is not able to succeed. What is the secret? How? And we become friends, and he's the one who starts helping me the most. And from here, everything started turning around.
It's crazy how, at the lowest point, that's
lowest
when just
rock bottom.
Boom.
It was under rock bottom. We're dug under the rock. And we still go through a long process. So fast forward, all the details. But at the end of the day, also Uganda, they said basically if I bring the father, and the father signs that I could take the kids, that I could take them. So I bring the father. It wasn't so simple. It wasn't easy. We had to do a bunch of different things. And he agrees that if I take them to Israel, because he understands that they go to school, and there's, potential for, I remember telling him, talking about how much money my daughters make when they babysit. And he's like, Count, are you for real? Is this real? And I bought him a smartphone. I bought him brand name clothes. I showed him what the Olam Hazeh could be like in a lot of different ways. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, there's a chance. And but then they said that they needed him to get the kids to get papers. Finally, Israel recognized us. We went back to the embassy. Israel recognized us, and they said, listen, you want to take the kids? Very simple. If they get passports and birth certificates, now these kids never had birth certificates, and they're signed and stamped by the minister, the exterior, Secretary of State himself, and the father signs, then you could take the kids to Israel. That's the orders we got from headquarters in Israel. It's kind of mission impossible. I remember I was very upset, and then that deputy, the same girl, the deputy basically told me, listen, it's hard, but at least you know what to do. I remember that night I was scared. I understood if they'd go back to South Sudan, the kids will probably never come back. But, we made a very good impression on the father. And the kids are already used to eating food and, good things. And
They know what an orange is, finally.
by then, they knew a lot more than just an orange by then. I remember I took the kids to Burger King. Now, kosher, so I ordered lettuce, basically. Instead of salad, the tachos was lettuce with some cucumbers. And then the kids started taking from my salad, just because that's what
You
they
have a
used to eat.
burger,
Oh,
touching
kids!
like lettuce.
Yeah, really. But, yeah, it was not pashut. Let's just say I lost a lot of weight. And they went to South Sudan. I went to Ethiopia to prepare the mother. And what happened was, so it was 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, about 5 days. Father's almost not answering the phone. When he does answer, I says, "What's with the papers? You're supposed to get the papers." "Oh, it's raining today." It's raining? And like, what type of excuses? And then they started making fun of me. You actually believed him. And then when they found out how much money I gave him, they're like, "Are you crazy? He's going to live with this money for the next couple of years. He doesn't need to go anywhere." And again, I gave up. I said, "It's not happening." I remember sitting down, giving up. And then I was like thinking to myself, like, you know how many mistakes I made and God never gave up on me. So how could I give up? And I said, I got to try one more thing. I'm like, just what? I'm like, just to be Yotzi, kind of, like one more thing, one thing. I'm thinking, what? And then I remembered that when we were in Kenya, and somebody, David, told us about there's a pastor from South Sudan that you should meet. And we brought him to breakfast, and we met the kids, and he blessed the kids and everything. And, he said maybe one day. And I remember I gave him, I think it was $200. I said, this is for the kids in South Sudan. You should do good things about it, whatever it was. And I was like, what did that pastor? He's a pastor in South Sudan, in Juba.
This is the second pastor, not the one that
second one that I met. So I said, you know what? I'll call him. I'll try. It's my shtadlus, And now you know how when you have to call your in-laws Erev Shabbos, and you let it ring once, and then you hang up. Oh, I called. They didn't answer. What could I do, I said, "Gotta do shtadlus." Yeah. But he answered on the first ring.
Oh, come on.
Now, you have to understand, South Sudan, nobody answers because there's never reception. The power's always down. There's always trouble. They don't have batteries for their phone. You have to leave your phone at the store to charge it because you don't have power at home. And he answers. I call. That's my luck, And I was like telling him the story. He's like, I actually have a connection with the State Department, with the external ministry. And within a couple hours, he sends me pictures of birth certificates signed by the Secretary of State. And he sends me pictures of the documents signed, just like that. And then we planned to go meet them. We were in Gondar, so we flew to Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. And they were supposed to fly also to the capital to meet us. And all of a sudden, on the way to the airport, the pastor says, wait, they need $200 for the visas. I was like, listen, I don't have, how am I can't wire you money, I can have a guy, it'll take a day, to give it to you, whatever. He's like, remember that money you gave me? I'll give it to them for the visas.
So basically, you're heading to Addis Ababa for the children to reunite with their parents.
In Addis Ababa, I'm with the mother, and we're going to the embassy in Addis Ababa because there's no embassy in Gondar. In Addis Ababa, there's an embassy, and that's where they could sign and get visas to go to Israel. And after they're on the plane and it takes off, and I asked this pastor from South Sudan, I said, what could I do to help? This is your time, ask. And he says, I want one thing. Give me a blessing in the name of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's all he wanted. And the interesting thing is the reason why he was in Kenya is because he has a bad case of diabetes. And they can't really treat it in South Sudan, so he travels by bus a couple days every couple months to Kenya, to Nairobi, Kenya, to treat it. And that's because of that. That's how I was able to meet him. He happened to be there. So we go to the embassy. We show up there. It's Friday afternoon. They stayed open, for us. And I'm like, birth certificate, passports. Yalla, Shabbos is coming. I gotta get home for Shabbos.
Shabbat Hayom.
It's been a couple months now. I haven't been home for a long time. You know?
What else do you need? I got you everything you asked for.
You know, yeah, I got it. It was Mission
Where's the
Impossible.
plane?
It was Mission Impossible and we got it. And I remember the consul looking, I remember his face, and he's like shaking his head, and I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You know? And he's like, listen, you got everything, but because we're in Ethiopia, you need it stamped by Ethiopian immigrations.
Come on.
Exactly what I said. I'm like, okay, I'll go there now. He's like, they're closed already. So, this is Thursday. So I said, okay, I'll go tomorrow morning. It was Thursday. I said, I'll go tomorrow morning, Friday morning. I showed up there early Friday morning. And there was people in tents sleeping outside waiting to get in. Hundreds of people. And then I remembered him telling me, I'm like, yeah, I'll be there first thing in the morning. He's like, take your time. You're in Africa. Everything goes slow here. And I show up there. I see hundreds of people camped out.
We thought here in Israel, we go to the embassy, we wait an hour in line. It's, waiting a long time. Yeah. Go wait for a week there.
Yeah. We camped out. And there's no numbers. There's no numbers. You just kind of show up. I finally, through the back door, I had my suit and my Israeli flag. And I said, I'm a diplomat coming from the Israel embassy. And one guy's like, show me your card. I was like, oh, I don't have it. If you call the embassy. Basically, I get in, packed. Again, no numbers. Just people packed there, just kind of squished, trying to edge towards the door to get whatever paper they needed. Can't imagine. No air conditioning. Flies, mosquitoes, barely breathe. Finally, I get to the guy. Here's the whole story. He brings me into the small office. I'm like, yalla, get the stamp. He looks at it. He's like, I can't stamp it. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I could only stamp it because you're in Ethiopia. You need the South Sudanese ambassador to stamp it first. I was like, but I have the actual Secretary of State. Yeah, but you're in Ethiopia. It doesn't work by the Secretary of State. You need the ambassador. I thought maybe he wanted a special visa fee or something like that. Nobody to talk to. Didn't work. Go downstairs. I just like to
pay him a couple of bucks under the table.
I thought. That's what I thought he wanted. I ended up, I go downstairs, take a cab. Now, these aren't cabs. These cabs are called cabs. The windows are broken. You're in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Hot, humid. Trucks, huge trucks right next to you with their mufflers just loading up the car. You cross the town. We get to the embassy, and there's no embassy. They moved to a new address. Nobody knows where it is. You start looking for it. You find it. I get there. I go in. And I'm sitting there, just me. And the girl there behind the desk, looking around. I'm like, am I waiting? What's going on? And I'm like, I need the ambassador to sign on these papers. And she's like, oh yeah, the ambassador's not here. So I'm waiting, and I come back, and I'm like, what's going on? And when is he coming? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, will he come today? Maybe yes, maybe no. Basically, what happened was we started a conversation, and she tells me that she has a very similar case, that she has kids also that don't live by her in South Sudan. And then I told her I'm helping this case. She's like, let me see what I can do. She takes the paper, she goes upstairs, comes back down, and they're stamped. I take them. The cab's waiting outside. I go back.
How did she get? She just snuck into the...
No, she found some guy, not the ambassador, to stamp it, and that's it. I paid whatever I paid. I go back to the place. I show them the stamp. They look at it, and they're like, no, this is a square stamp. You need a circle stamp. I really thought he was pulling something. But so I'm like, show me what you need, So he shows me on the screen the circle stamp. I take a picture of it. I go back down. In the meantime, I call the Israel ambassador to South Sudan. He calls the ambassador over there, and he comes special to show up. I go upstairs. He's about to sign, and then his assistant comes in and takes the stamp from him. And they start fighting with each other. They're like, you can't stamp. You're supposed to do a square stamp, not a circle stamp. And they want a circle. We'll explain to Ethiopia. We do the circle, the square. Basically, the circle is for personal letters, and the square is for documents. This is a document. And Ethiopia didn't know. They said they'll tell them. And then he starts saying, wait, how could you even stamp? Maybe he's stealing the kids. And they start talking in Arabic, yeah. And then basically I tell them, listen, I'm bringing these children to the chosen land. I already
Oh,
understood.
now you
Now I'm
already.
losing it. While I'm saying it, the bastard takes a stamp from his advisor, stamps and signs. He says, "Take these kids to the chosen land, and do a prayer for me as well." I take the paper, go back to the cab. This cab is so happy, it doesn't drive a Westerner every day. He's like going back and forth. It's basically I didn't tell him to wait. He just waits there, he doesn't care. Brings him back. I get there, the office is closed. They're on lunch break. Now it's Friday, okay? The day before was Thursday, now it's Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, the Israeli embassy closes and doesn't open till Monday. I call the consul in the Israeli embassy. He calls the guy from Ethiopia. He comes back as he's like licking his fingers from the injury. I'm really upset. Who takes him out of lunch break? They have a 2-hour lunch break.
Wow.
And you wonder why.
And they all take a lunch break at the same time?
Yeah. He goes to the office, and then he's like, starts looking at it, and he starts, causing trouble. And he's like, give me the phone. Give him the phone. I give him the phone. The Israeli guy, schmoozes him up, whatever. And he's like, what is it? What country? Why are you guys, helping these two kids? I don't get it, And he stamps. Takes out of the wooden drawer these stamps the papers, gives them to me. In the meantime, they're holding the Israeli embassy open. It's already like an hour past when they're supposed to close. That's with the security and everything. We show up there with the mom and the father and the kids. The father got in a fight with the mom, almost threw her off the balcony. And basically, we're there. We're trying to hold the situation. And the guy stamps and gives us the visas. And they have visas. In the meantime, I get notice that my connection is also for the mother gets her entry as well. So now I have the visas for the kids, and the mother as well is also able to make aliyah through a different thing. We're able to get a flight for Sunday. So I'm thinking, how am I supposed to keep them busy from Friday afternoon till Sunday? Throughout of all of Shabbos, we just kept him busy. Took him out at night. Restaurants, parties, whatever it was, as long as he's busy. Sunday morning, we're about to go finally to the airport. Finally. And I take her document, and I take the kid's document, and because her document was through something else, her family in Israel changed her name. They didn't want anybody, they were embarrassed from the South Sudanese background, roots, so they gave her Ethiopian names. Instead of Piat, they gave her Eutebia. Ethiopian name. Instead of her father Bakoriel, it's Asafe, also Ethiopian name. But the kids had all the South Sudanese. Now her it says place born Ethiopia, they're South Sudan. Now their mother's name is one thing, and their birth certificate.
This is the mother, but it says something else.
So it's not even the same name. So I call my connection in the startup Panim here in Israel, and he says, listen, first of all, you didn't tell me anything. I don't know about this. Second of all, whatever you do, don't go to the airport with them.
You're going to have the child trafficking.
And even worse, because when it comes to Israel, Israel will think that it's not a real case, and because it's a classic thing where a mom gets chok hashvut, right of return, and then somebody pays her to bring their kids. Classic. And then what happens is they just freeze the case, and they'll months till you even unfreeze it. What do? Did a lot of davening. Said every parakah Tehillim I knew by heart. We show up at the airport, and I tell the mom, I said, listen, remember when we were in Ethiopia, and you saw in the Ethiopian Jewish community, they were baking these weird things on the fire? And I explained to you what matzah is. And I said, when the Jewish people need to leave Egypt, it was taking them forever. They didn't believe. And finally, when the time came, I said, now is your time. I said, today you're landing in Israel. Today you're going to land in Israel, and my friend is going to be there waiting for you. And she looks at me, and she looks at the kids, and she says, what about you and the kids? I said, I don't know. We might land today also. We might land in a week. We might land in a month. But you go today. She says goodbye to me. She says goodbye to the kids. She goes to the airport. About 45 minutes later, she calls me up. She tells me, Anaf, you're about 10:10. I'm at gate 32, waiting to board the plane. I said, okay, now it's time to pray. Start praying.
Basically, you also go to the airport, the same flight, but separate, without the mother. So
Exactly. And I kept on telling the kids, if anybody stops us and asks them where the mom is, just say Israel. Where's mom in Israel? We practice. Where's mom in Israel? Where's mom in Israel? Because why? Worse to worse, if they stop us, at least the mom will land in Israel. Now, once the mom lands in Israel, she could change her name, whatever it needs, and she could come back and get them. But let her land in Israel. Because when you land in Israel, she makes aliyah. You don't land in Israel. So the most important that she gets through. If we get stuck, we'll be stuck. We go through the ticketing, we go through security. Then we get to passport control. Passport control, the guy there, his job is basically make sure people like me don't come through. And we give the passports, and I see him standing up, and he looks down. He's looking at the kids, he's looking at me, he's going like this, and he's like, are these your kids? Boom. It hit me. I felt like mamish, like Rosh Hashanah. I'm standing in front of Yom Adin, Sefer Chaim or Sefer Mavet is right in front of me. And here he goes. He either stamps me in the book of life or the book of no return. I remember, again, I went black. I started saying, Al Tehillim, V'inam, Adonai Eloheinu, Aleinu, Ma'aserenu, Konaleinu, Ma'aserenu, Konaleinu. המלמד ידע לקרב, עצמתה למלחמה, אלה ברכב, אלה בסוסים, ואנחנו משם אדוני אלוהינו נזכיר. הם בקרו ונפל, אנחנו קמנו תודד. אדוני יושיע מלך עלינו ביום קורנו. Saying it to myself, not knowing what to answer. I was just kind of hoping that it would be like, these are not the droids you are looking for, and he'll just let me pass. And now all of a sudden he's asking me, and what am I supposed to do?
Like you say, yeah, I mean, you're right, they're black, like, obviously not the father.
I'm just hoping that,
it's different names, and if you say they're not my children, okay, so what are you doing with them? So it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. And all of a sudden I kind of came back to myself, and I took my jacket, and I had the Israeli flag pin on it. Because I learned already that Israel is a positive thing. And I said, these are Israel's children. And they sent me here to bring them home. And the guy sits down, goes like this, and I hear the stamp on the passports. And as he's stamping, he's going like this, and he's like, who is this country that sends people all around the world to bring their kids? And I remember taking the kids' hands, and you don't know if you should walk fast just to get away, but then it looks suspicious, or to walk slow. When you walk slow, they might change their mind. And I remember you get to the escalator that brings you up to the floor of the gates, and all of a sudden I hear the girl screaming, and her hand slips out of my hand, and I look down, she's never seen moving steps before. I had to pick the boy up in one hand and start going the opposite direction down the escalator, try to take her, just pushing me away, and everybody from passport control is looking at us, and I'm like, yeah, kids, you know how they are. And I grabbed her, grabbed him, and we went up the steps. And her mom was there, praying on the chair. We boarded the plane, and we landed in Israel.
Wow.
And when we got off the plane, there's a girl from the agency with a big sign that said, welcome home. Welcome home, Olim. And I explained to her in Arabic. And that was the first time where she realized it's not that she's coming to a better place or something like that. No, she came home. This is her home.
She's Jewish.
Yeah. And she met Aliyah. And then, I didn't know, but in Israel, the law is when you make Aliyah, you get a cab that takes you home. Israel pays for a taxi. And they paid for a taxi right here to Ish Kodesh. And the taxi driver is Moroccan. And he looks back and he starts speaking to her in Arabic, Moroccan Jew. And she's like, sister, welcome home. This is your home. And we showed up here. She lived here for a while. Now she's at Absorption Center up north. And they started a new life here.
Wow.
That's it.
Incredible. You still meet up with them, I'm sure,
Once
from
a
time
month.
to time? Wow, once a month.
Once a month I'm there.
Wow. It's incredible. How does it feel to have been through something like this?
Listen, it's not simple. I went through a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, it's not so easy. It's very hard times. I broke a couple times. Still get flashbacks sometimes. But when I go visit them, or when they come here and visit me, and I see the kids happy, and I see them playing, and I see them healthy, and speaking Hebrew, becoming Israeli, succeeding in school, I just look at them, and it's the most pleasure, the the most fulfillment anybody could ever feel, just to look at them and see them succeeding here.
What really, like, when you heard the story from, like, the mother, that she didn't see her two daughters in 10 years, like, well, obviously everyone hears stories and different stuff, and, so you try to help as much as possible. You give tzedakah, you give a little bit of your time, donations, but, like, what, like, to actually go and, like, a whole rescue mission and to try to find them, and, like, what gave you that push? What was the, like, motivation behind it?
So again, I didn't know if I would actually really succeed doing it, but I said all I have to do is try. I have to try. Do my shadlus, do what I could do. And the same thing, as I said, if my daughter was in trouble and somebody would hear about it, would I want him to do his shadlus? Would I want him to give some tzedakah?
Wow.
At the end of the day, when there's makom sheni sheshtadel liotish, there's nobody else out there. You got to do what you got to do.
So I think that's, what you did is a little bit more than just, gotta do what you gotta do.
I don't know. I think that every person has to. The sad thing, I don't know if it's sad or not, but when I was there, you kind of go out and try to get a lot of people to help you in different ways. And a lot of good people out there, like when I needed that flight, or hotels, costs, everything, different friends that I had, they in a second paid without even thinking twice. I had like friends that they couldn't sleep at night because they didn't know where I was. And only now I realize it, that then I didn't understand. I was too busy on surviving myself. And at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do, to help somebody else. And all of a sudden you realize, who are the people that were willing to say, listen, I'll do it. If you want, I'll drop everything and fly down and help you. I didn't think it would help, so I told them not to.
Just another guy to be in prison with me.
Yeah, so, no, really. And sometimes when you see a lot of people, then it looks like child trafficking. Like a group or organization, and it's like, sometimes better not to have that. But people, and then you see like who's helps, who doesn't help, who all of a sudden disappears, and who's, there for you, who wants to help you. And
what would you give maybe a little advice for someone, because a lot of people, like I said, we always have different stuff that come up and helping and stuff, or dreams people have or stuff they want to do or a new job or open a business but just to, like you actually, saw someone in need, something that needs to happen and, you went out and you just did it. So what, like, to be more of a doer, what would you give like advice for someone?
I used to think a lot, like when you hear the stories of smuggling Jews out of, concentration camps in Europe, or out of Syria and Lebanon in the founding of the country, or even out of Morocco in the 50s, and out of ghettos. And I used to think to myself, if I was back then, would I have done it or not? The Bereshit ship, the ships that came into Israel. I used to think, would I have gone out and risked myself? Now, we look back at these people, oh, they were heroes. But at the time, their moms would scream at them, what are you doing endangering yourself? Their wife or kids or girlfriends or whoever it was would be like, how can you do this? It's irresponsible, da da da. So at the time, everybody is against you. Everybody explains to you how you're not going to succeed and how it's wrong and foolish. That's what everybody always tells you. Only after the fact, people come and say, oh, wow. And not just that. People say, oh, yeah, I would have done it like this. They start telling you how they would have done it better and all that.
The same guys who, when you did it, told you that you shouldn't do it, after the success, the same guys come over and like, oh, me, yeah, for sure I would do it.
And then they start telling you how they would have done it better. Now, the thing is that, so first of all, like, you have to think about what would you have done back in the day. And then you realize, oh yeah, I would have for sure helped the underground or the Machteret or whatever it was. And then you say, listen, today every person has their own type of whatever it is. If it's helping somebody in a different country, or if it's helping someone in your own neighborhood, or if it's helping a friend or a friend's child. Starting from smiling to your neighbor or friend or somebody who's less, capable, to actually helping them, giving them tools, giving them whatever you can, And you start with that. And to go out of yourself and help somebody else. And, if that's what you could do, so that's what you do. And dare to dream. Dare to dream. And know when you dream, everybody's going to tell you, oh, you're dreaming, it's childish. And you're being
Life
a
is
fool.
not a movie.
People are going to tell you that.
Stick to the positive people and do what you believe.
Well, yeah. You need a lot of emunah, and you have to be focused and know what you want, and know that you're going to break down. Many times in the middle, I broke down at night and said, "That's it. It's over. I can't do it anymore." In the morning, I said, "You know what? I'll try one more day. One more day." And then at night, I'm like, "I can't do this. I've given up. I can't." Cry. And then the next morning, I'm like, "You know what? Give it one more day. One more day. Sometimes one more hour even."
Well, looking back now, after the fact, now that you see that they have their own life, looking back, you'd be in the same situation. You would do it over again.
I don't know. It's hard. Not for shoot. Let's just say I would do it differently, maybe.
But maybe, we're here for the Shmita program, so maybe just to get a little bit of Shmita in, maybe just tell us a little bit about the farm here, what you do. I know you have a vineyard, so tell us a little bit about that and how Shmita affects it.
So about 11 years ago when I came here, and we read in Rosh Hashanah, the Nevuah of Yirmiyahu, Lamed Aleph, Otiti Kramim B'Vishamon. Talks about the Jews going to exile, and then says one day they will come back and they will plant vineyards in the mountains of Shomron. And I said, look at this Nevuah, let's be part of this prophecy. A lot of people told Yirmiyahu, you're dreaming, you're childish, you're foolish, what do you mean? Plant vineyards in the mountains of Shomron. First of all, I don't know when the Jews are coming back. Second of all, it's mountains, it's bedrock. How will it grow? Yirmiyahu said, we planted vineyards, and now people say that the vineyards here are the highest quality grapes to make the best wine. And it took a while, and there wasn't water, problem with irrigation. And finally, the grapes started growing, and we made wine, and people tasted it, and a lot of people said this is the best wine they've ever tasted. Now we make about 5,000 bottles a year. Most of the wine, just from our vineyard, it's all exported. Most of it is pre-sold before it's bottled already. Out of the 5,000, close to 4,000 are sold before they're even bottled.
Now, well, what is the company called?
It's called Settlers. But I have a brand that people do private labeling. They do a minimum of 2 cases, usually 2 to 4 cases, so 24 to 48 bottles, and they get their own private label. In the back, it has a story with the pasuk of Yirmiyahu. And when they do it, they also take part. They're partners in the vineyard. So they at least 50 square feet. So they're doing all the mitzvahs of land, like a chikopeh, trumas, maasros, and now Shmita. And then Makayim Shmita. And 222 harvest is Shmita, which means it's hefker. Anybody can come and take it, which is not easy. Not easy. All of a sudden to miss a harvest, it's a lot of income that you're missing. But that's the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah here. There's certain things we still do in the vineyard. It needs irrigation. It's actually getting water right now. I have to change because we don't have enough water pressure, so I do half and then another half. And there's certain things we do, but the fruit are hefker.
Well, and also, how do you keep yourself busy?
Well, that's my side job. My main job is I work for the Benjamin Regional Council. I fundraise, and we collect money for a lot of different projects, different rescue projects also that we're doing. And also, we help a lot of teens at risk, different programs. We just built a nice teen center. And then we do like the classics, shoals, mikvahs, different tourist attractions. Mostly teens at risk courses. And we're doing now a course where we're teaching middle school kids coding. That's
Computer.
The future.
Yeah.
Talk about languages, you go to school and you learn French, which might be important. Imagine learning as a kid the language of writing, programming.
No,
That's the future.
So you teach programming, or
I don't
more
know
in
anything about programming, but I met somebody who made a lot of money programming, and he was actually a surgeon, and he got into a car accident, and then he had to kind of in the middle of life try to learn something else. And with his medical background, he wrote a program that helps hospitals all over the U.S. And he wanted to help the kids here in Binyamin. And we just did a pilot program, middle school, 12, 13 years old. And they're amazing. They wrote programs and they built these like cars with their program that, like a little car, Their program teaches it, to drive straight, right, left. It has sensors close to the wall.
Wow.
It can stop. Yeah. They did this
That's
all, which is
crazy.
unbelievable. Yeah. And now we have 17 schools in Binyamin, and we're trying to now raise money to do this program in all of the schools in Binyamin.
And what brought you here to live out, out in the middle of nowhere?
Beautiful nature, green, trees, out in the open, clean air, and it's Eretz Yisrael, it's Eretz Yisrael. This is where most of the stories happen, in the Tanakh, right here in the heart of Israel, right by Shiloh. Shiloh is the capital of Israel for 369 years before Jerusalem.
Mishkan Shiloh, yeah.
Mishkan Shiloh, Eli, Shmuel, Tfilas Chana, all happened right here.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I
you.
really, really appreciate it. It was a really incredible story. I hope, we need more of the doers, really, people to help. It's really incredible thing that, Hashem, gave you this mission to do. It's literally straight out of a movie. I mean, even crazier. In the movie, how he gets arrested, and then he gets out, and then you got to keep on getting arrested, and they kick you out like no one's on your side, and they just,
Listen, you do what you have to do. God, whatever he thinks is right, we'll do the rest.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and tzlacha with everything. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe. If you would like to help us spread the word, give this video a thumbs up and a 5-star review. Also, don't forget to ask your friends to subscribe as well. If you would like to partner with us and sponsor an episode, send an email to info@JFoundations.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. We will see you in the next video.